Welcome back to our channel, where we explore alternate histories and fascinating scenarios. Today, we're diving into one of the tensest moments in history, the Cuban Missile Crisis. What if this crisis didn't end peacefully? What if it escalated into an all-out nuclear war?
In 1962, the Cold War was more than just icy stares across the Iron Curtain. The United States had nuclear missiles in Turkey and Italy aimed right at the Soviet Union. Refusing to be one-upped, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev decided to place nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida.
On October 14th, a U.S. U-2 spy plane captured photos of Soviet missile sites in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy and his team were in a high-stakes poker game, deciding how to respond. On October 22nd, JFK went on national TV and revealed the Soviet missiles, announcing a naval blockade around Cuba. The world held its breath.
For 6 days, negotiations were tense. On October 28th, the crisis was diffused when Khrushchev agreed to dismantle the missiles in exchange for a U.S. promise not to invade Cuba and a secret deal to remove American missiles from Turkey. Crisis averted.
But what if things had gone differently? What if those negotiations had failed and the world was plunged into chaos? Let's dive into this alternate history where the Cuban Missile Crisis goes nuclear, literally.
On October 22, 1962, Kennedy announces the blockade. The Soviet Union, seeing this as an act of aggression, decides to call his bluff. Khrushchev orders Soviet ships with more missiles to head straight for Cuba, escorted by submarines with nuclear torpedoes.
As Soviet ships close in on the blockade line, U.S. naval forces prepare for a showdown. A Soviet submarine, captained by Valentin Savitsky, gets surrounded by American destroyers. With the crew exhausted and overheating, they think they're under attack. Savitsky, convinced World War III has begun, orders the nuclear torpedo armed. But, in a dramatic twist, Officer Vasily Arkhipov refuses to launch, saving the day.
Despite Arkhipav's heroics, diplomatic talks hit a wall. The U.S. demands all missiles out of Cuba, while Khrushchev insists on the U.S. publicly removing its missiles from Turkey first. Kennedy, facing pressure from his military advisors and concerned about the broader implications, says no deal.
Meanwhile, Fidel Castro, feeling cornered and paranoid, urges Khrushchev to hit the U.S. first. Khrushchev, under mounting pressure, starts to see fewer and fewer options. On October 26th, Kennedy, feeling the urgency of the situation and the need to act decisively, orders airstrikes on Cuban missile sites. The strikes are devastating, but not perfect. Some missiles survive, and the collateral damage is massive, with Cuban civilians caught in the crossfire.
In a fiery retaliation, Soviet forces in Cuba launch a tactical nuclear missile at the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay. The explosion is colossal, and the world watches in horror as the first nuclear strike since Hiroshima and Nagasaki lights up the sky. With nukes now in play, global panic sets in. NATO and Warsaw Pact forces scramble to high alert. Cities across the world conduct civil defense drills, and people hoard supplies, fearing the worst.
The UN Security Council is in chaos, unable to broker peace. The clock is ticking, and the world inches closer to doomsday. On October 27th, the crisis hits its breaking point. A U.S. U-2 spy plane is shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot. Both superpowers see this as the final straw.
Kennedy, fearing the threat to national security, orders a full-scale invasion of Cuba. Soviet commanders, seeing the writing on the wall, unleash their remaining nuclear arsenal. Missiles fly towards Miami and New Orleans, causing catastrophic damage. In a retaliatory strike, the U.S. launches nuclear missiles at Soviet cities. Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev. The world as we know it ends in a blinding flash of nuclear fire.
The nuclear exchange leaves the planet in ruins. Major cities are obliterated, with tens of millions dead. The environment is shattered, plunging the world into a nuclear winter. Crops fail, and a global famine sets in, turning survival into a daily struggle.
In the United States, chaos reigns. The government retreats to bunkers, but martial law and civil unrest grip the country. In the Soviet Union, the central government collapses, and the once mighty Union fragments into warring states.
Let's take a look at the alternate fates of the key figures involved. John F. Kennedy. Relocated to a secure bunker, JFK grapples with the consequences of his actions. His legacy is tarnished, and a military coup eventually removes him from power, plunging the U.S. into a period of authoritarian rule.
Nikita Khrushchev, killed in the nuclear strike on Moscow, Khrushchev's death sparks a brutal power struggle in the Soviet Union, leading to its fragmentation.
Fidel Castro survives the initial chaos but is later assassinated by his own disillusioned followers, blaming him for Cuba's devastation. His death triggers a bloody civil war.
Robert F. Kennedy, playing a key role in resistance, RFK becomes a symbol of hope against the military regime in the U.S. captured and executed. He becomes a martyr for democracy.
Vasily Arkhipov. Initially hailed as a hero, Arkhipov is later executed by a rival Soviet faction, seen as a scapegoat for the catastrophe.
The nuclear war shatters the old world order. Europe, caught in the crossfire, faces political and social upheaval. New alliances form from the ashes as nations scramble to rebuild.
Asia and Africa, though less directly hit, suffer economic and environmental fallout. The global economy collapses, trade halts, and millions are plunged into poverty and chaos.
This alternate history is a grim reminder of how close we came to disaster. The Cuban Missile Crisis could have ended in nuclear horror, highlighting the importance of diplomacy, restraint, and wise leadership.
As we ponder this what-if scenario, let's remember the real lessons: the value of communication, the necessity of compromise, and the terrifying power of nuclear weapons. While we were lucky to avoid this dark path in reality, this story serves as a chilling reminder of what could have been and the fragile peace we must continue to safeguard.
Thanks for watching this gripping episode of What If. If you enjoyed this deep dive into alternate history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode.
Drop a comment below on which what-if scenario you want us to explore next. Until next time, stay curious and always dream big.